All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Excuse me, lady. Could you tell me what Bagel Street is?
Bagel Street? Oh, why did you have to remind me of Bagel Street?
Hey, stop insulting women. Look, all I asked her is where was Bagel Street? Yeah.
Bagel Street? Bagel Street! Don't ever mention that name again! That drives me crazy!
Excuse me, mister.
Don't ask me where Bagel Street is.
HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. In Alison Tiemann's threat narrative series, she described a means of personal attack wherein the aggressor, rather than directly assaulting her target, strives to manipulate others' perceptions in a way that villainizes the target. As Alison described, the aggressor achieves this by increasing perception of the target's agency and intent to do bad, but decreasing perception of the target's vulnerability, while presenting the opposite, decreased agency and intent to do bad, but increased vulnerability in herself. For a better understanding of threat narratives and how they affect interpersonal and group conflicts, I recommend watching Alison's entire threat narrative series, which will be linked in the low bar of this video and the bottom of the transcript page. For purposes of this discussion, however, you only need know that a threat narrative relies on that basic formula and can be used by virtually anyone to manipulate bystander opinion against virtually anyone else. This is the primary tool of the victim identity cult. As explained in past episodes of HBR Talk, victim identity cult is a descriptor for the entire spectrum of politics that is centered around a group victim identity rather than a set of ideals. This identity is often used as their primary argument in political debate, wherein evidence of historical oppression is used both as a means of justification for the group's demands and as a shield against any criticism. As is the moral of the story of the boy who cried wolf, overuse of the usual victim identity threat narratives, accusations of racism, sexism, and homophobia, for example, has hardened people against their effects. These methods are no longer stopping independent discussion from taking place. In some cases, they're even getting turned back on those who use them. As that has become less and less effective, the victim identity cult has opened up a new tactic. In it, the target's agency and the aggressor's vulnerability are so inflated that the aggressor can expect to be taken seriously portraying herself as the victim of the target's own thoughts, or even her anticipation of what he might think. This is achieved by framing ideas in melodramatic terms and applying those terms indiscriminately. Ideas are no longer concepts to be evaluated for flaws or validity. They are absolutes with immediate impact on anyone who is exposed to them, an impact that is determined not by the idea's merits, but by the listener's reaction to it. They are good or evil, gospel or blasphemy, right think or wrong think, and any discussion around topics related to them must be filtered through that outlook. If an expressed thought contains even a grain of pushback against a right-think idea, or even opens a question not accounted for by right-think, it is tainted with wrongthink, and is therefore wrongthink itself. That wrongthink then associates it with whatever the aggressor decides is the exact opposite of her position, or the worst prejudices she can imagine, regardless of whether they have anything to do with the original idea or not. The aggressor's objections to and fear of the target's alleged prejudices, along with the supposed right to feel safe, are now the body of her argument, exempting her, in her mind, from discussing the idea at all. She needs no evidence, just the ability to claim she feels unsafe. She can't even deal with you right now because you're so wrong it's scary. She is short-circuiting, in fact, because of you and your terrifying articulation of things originating from outside her safe, established narrative. She can't answer what you said because it's beyond consideration. In fact, she can't can't even finish her sentences, so horrified is she by the threat of whatever might be on your mind, so she just can't even. Why, she is probably even literally shaking right now. In this way, independent thought itself has become the boogeyman of the victim identity cult. You cannot question the details of the victim narrative, suggest alternative ideas, ask that excluded demographics be brought into the discussion, or take a humorous approach to a topic over which the victim cult claims ownership. Even questioning the validity of the accusation is seen as a threat. In fact, you cannot be the arbiter of your own position. Your information, your intentions, your context, none of those matter. Your aggressor's lived experience is that of feeling unsafe. Therefore, you must be dangerous. Once an individual has been effectively labeled a wrongthink boogeyman, the unpersoning process has begun. Remember, this is taking place in the context of a presumed right to feel safe. It doesn't matter if nothing that is being said about you is true, or could be rationally construed as evidence that you actually make anyone unsafe. Truth and logic are not what matters here. Your aggressor's reaction can now replace them, colloquially described as her truth. And her truth is that you're a bad person if she doesn't like how she feels about what you said. This, in turn, is used as justification for silencing tactics, from social media suspensions and event bans to outright violence, massive protest against public speakers, financial blacklisting of wrongthink media, major widespread establishment media campaigns targeting high school kids for wearing the wrong hats, and even criminal conviction for the making of a politically incorrect joke. You cannot explore unpopular intellectual territory without facing serious backlash as a result of others' alleged fears, including fears relying on territory you did not actually tread. Your rights and freedoms are now being asked to take a back seat to victim identity cultists' comfort levels. Where is this taking us? How do we find solutions to difficult problems if, when prevailing ideas become outdated or turn out to have been wrong in the first place, they cannot be challenged without fear of being labeled dangerous, attacked, and punished by the victim identity cult? What is left to differentiate between science and superstition, mechanics and magic? How do we fix what is broken if examination of its flaws is verboten? If we ban logic, what do we have left? Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 71, I'm Afraid You're Wrong, Grievance Tactics of the Victim Identity Cult. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with She Who Must Be Obeyed, Karen Strawn, and nonsense annihilator, Lauren B., and that adorable specter of death, Prim Reaper, to rip the padding off of the walls of your safe spaces. If you want to support our work, even in the midst of the financial blacklisting that I described in our nice little intro there, feedthebadger.com is going to be the most stable way to help. And if you want to keep track of what we're doing, then you need to go to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications. You know, got to keep an eye on us, because who knows what will happen. Remember, Badger Feed for information, feed the Badger to support our work. And speaking of Badgers working, Karen will be part of the post-showing panel at the Red Pill in, was it Fort McMurray? Because I missed a line. Okay, Fort McMurray. I missed copying a line on that page. In Alberta, on Sunday, February 17, this year, obviously. I don't know why it had the date listed for me to read, but not the city. But if you're in the area and you want to see the film and pelt Karen with questions afterward, the show, or watch her answer questions from feminists who may show up, the showing is from 2:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. There is a link in the low bar to the event pages on Eventbrite, and also FortMercuryTourism.com. Because I was good at Fort McMurray Tourism.com. You're right.
Fort Mac is actually it started out as a work camp and then turned into a city. So
oh, nice.
So it essentially was born in physical work done by men who spent long periods of time away from their families. So it's sort of it's an iconic, and it was almost completely destroyed by a wildfire. I think about a third of the town burned. The city, it was a city of, I think, 60,000 people. A third of it burned, and everybody was evacuated, and the entire province mobilized to house all of the evacuees just a couple of years ago. So it's in recovery. Even Nick Redding, our resident evil overlord, our evil shitlord, who ran for Ward 8 of City Council in Edmonton, Alberta here a few years ago under the Patriarchy Party ticket. He actually went up as a member of the crew that cleaned up all of the toxic mess that was left after a third of that city burned. So it's a city in recovery, and I think it's maybe in need of some red pilling too.
Yeah,
So.
it's definitely a perfect spot for a showing of the red pill. And like I said, it is Sunday, February 17th from 2:30 to 5:30. There are 2 links. The Eventbrite page actually gives you the ability to register. I didn't see anything on the tourism page, but definitely go and check it out. If you are able to get there to watch the red pill showing, and go see Karen. And last but not least, if you want the opportunity to nag everyone else into checking us out, don't forget to smash that like button. Share us on every social media site you use. It'll trigger all the snowflakes. Now, on to the topic of the mysterious, terrifying, great again, whitey-loving, wrongthink boogeyman.
But I don't feel safe, though.
Oh my God. Okay, I just, there is so much shit going down right now. It is just unbelievable. I can hardly keep up with it. And it's like, so we have the APA saying that traditional masculinity is on the whole harmful to men, women, and children.
Of course.
We have Gillette essentially saying that too few men are good men, and so some men are good, but not enough, and so men need to be better. We, just a few months ago, we had Maisie, what's her name, the senator, saying that men need to step up. Who's doing all of these bad things? Well, it's men. Right, men need to step up and shut up, and we have just got this atmosphere, this barrage. It is literally war on men. It is war on men right now, and because they're dangerous and they're bad and they're horrible. They're really awful. They're really horrible, awful, no good, really bad people. And
honestly, I don't know why the prevailing thing to go to is unsafe. Like, what are you feeling unsafe from? If I were to go on Twitter and send out a tweet that made you feel a little uncomfortable, is uncomfortable the only qualification to feel unsafe these days? Because that's what it seems like.
Well, what's really hilarious, right? Because we had Kathy Griffin saying, dox these guys, these kids, right? Dox them and then shame them. Shame them. I want names. I want their names publicized, and they need to be shamed.
Well, not only that, but there were people saying that he needs to get punched in the face.
And stuff. Like, there was a woman offering freaking blowjobs to anybody who would punch this kid in the face, right? And it's like,
is that not fucked up?
Well, it seems like a random thing.
Tweets, all of these tweets.
Yeah, women in the progressive end of the of crazy in politics do that. They offer blowjobs for people to, like, who was it? Was it Madonna that was offering people blowjobs to vote for Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, okay, but here's the thing. Okay, Bering and his buddies on a live stream the other night, a week or two ago, essentially said, you know, what that kid should do, Nick Sandman, right? He should film himself punching himself in the face and then go demand his blowjob. Right?
There you go.
Perfect.
And I'm like, yeah, he really fucking should. And, you know, but essentially what we have are these tweets, right? None of these people have been banned from Twitter, right? None of these people have, you know, had any repercussions, right? But in the, okay, so the Women's March in Australia, somebody posted a Australian feminist who said, I don't understand why everybody's so upset about the Gillette ad. And they posted a tweet of her saying that, right? If you're not one of those men, then it's not aimed at you. And then a tweet of her showing the picture of the Australian men's rights guys with the exact freaking gender reverse quote on a sign standing off to the side of the Women's March and saying, these men are disgusting human beings for, you know, for doing this, right? And that was the start of the conversation. And when I replied to her, somebody tagged me in it, right? And when I replied to her, she said, why are you pretending to be a girl?
Oh my God.
And I said, wow, misgendering me, reported. And on a lark, I reported her. And the next day, Twitter got back to me and said her account was locked and it would remain locked until she took the steps they required.
Oh my gosh.
So they're backing it regardless of which side of the... So apparently,
she
LGBT victimhood...
She misgendered me. That's a danger. Calling for putting high school boys into wood chippers is not enough to get your account suspended, but... her saying, why are you pretending to be a girl? I don't think her account should have been suspended.
No, it shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But apparently
And I mean,
in Twitter's
learn to
progressive
code.
stack, you know, LGBT victimhood trumps female victimhood, which obviously trumps violent crime victimhood if the violent crime victim is a victim of a violent crime committed by someone on the progressive left.
And plus, I mean, you know, everybody...
that victim of a violent crime is potentially male, right? Like incitement to violence.
Yeah.
We're looking at actually. So, like, you know, you can say, well, First Amendment issues, right? And, you know, and Twitter has First Amendment rights as well, right? They have free speech rights, and they have they have every right under the First Amendment to dictate what is said on their platform, right? But incitement to violence is not protected by the First Amendment, and yet those tweets are still there.
But, you know, learn to code, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was going too far. I'm just going to ban myself from the show now.
No.
Don't go.
You're not allowed to ban yourself from the show until I read Hokibukisa's $1.99 super chat. Alison! He's a little confused. As I mentioned Alison in the opener, but didn't drag her onto the show because she's got so much on her plate right now. I thought, I am not even gonna put that in front of her. How to explode Alison in one easy step. Boom.
Yeah.
Here's one more thing to do. But yeah, no. The thing that really led me to choose this topic this week is all of the craziness around people claiming they felt unsafe watching the video of a boy not running away when a man came along and got in his face and was confrontational. Like, people keep saying aggressive. I think of aggressive as if you, like, lean over and start, poking at somebody. But that's probably because of the neighborhood I grew up in. But that was confrontational. It's getting up in his face like that and, not talking. Just continuing to drum loudly and sing at him and everything, and he wasn't understanding what was going on and all of that. He wasn't supposed to be allowed to have any sympathy, for feeling unsafe in that situation, even though he and his friends were surrounded by adults who were yelling not just offensive, but really confrontational things at them, really derogatory things at them. But yeah, there were people on Twitter actually saying that watching that video and seeing the boy just stand there with that look on that uncomfortable look on his face, that made them feel unsafe. Menace. Yeah,
he's a smirking, the smiling menace.
Yeah,
face.
Yeah. Having been grown up in a neighborhood with a lot of bullying, I recognize that face. That's the I can't do anything right now face. You know, I don't want to be aggressive, but I can't walk away from this because it's going to follow me. This situation is just going to go wherever I go.
You know what's interesting, Hannah?
Yeah.
Is that Desmond Morris? He's a zoologist, right? But he wrote books and did a documentary series called The Naked Ape, which is very, very interesting. And it's a lot of it is based in evolutionary psychology, but he actually described his hypothesis on the evolution of the smile. And the evolution of the smile is fear, right? When you look at people on roller coasters, when you look at chimpanzees who are being attacked, right? They get this big wide grin, right? And their eyebrows go up, and they essentially smile. And he thinks that over time, the smile that started as an indication that I'm not a threat to you and I don't want to engage in hostility became a signal for I'm friendly.
Yeah. And it's quite possible. That actually is a pretty reasonable explanation for it. But the idea that this kid was aggressive because he didn't do anything, that just like that was the end of it for me. And then people talking about, well, this is what the MAGA hat means because this is how it makes us feel. No, you don't get to decide that. It's not your prerogative to determine for the wearer of the hat what the hat means. The hat means what the wearer of the hat decides it means. It's their statement they're making, not yours.
Yeah, I was kind of astounded at how many people were saying, "Oh, I have seen that smirk. That is an evil smirk." And it's like, okay, you guys are just taking like one photo out of context of everything. But if you watch the entire rest of the what's going on, it's like, are you serious? Like just 5 seconds ago, like these kids were saying to the guys who were shouting all of the racist things. It's like, oh no, that's racist. That's a bad thing to say. You shouldn't say that.
Yeah. Gays are still human beings.
Yeah.
They still deserve rights. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Because these black Hebrew Israelites were shouting the reason why the U.S. is failing or whatever is the reason why God hates you is because the United States gave faggots rights.
Yeah.
Right. And,
oh wow.
And these kids said, but they're still human. Like, what the hell are you talking about, right?
Yeah, they were booing them. They were challenging these guys, saying these terrible things. So
yeah, and then we have this talking head on fucking CNN, right? She's saying, "Oh, and this smirking boy, and he was like abusing and mocking a Native American Vietnam veteran, and there was another group there who were preaching the Bible and talking about oppression."
Oh, and suddenly CNN values the Bible because they usually hate Christians.
I'm saying the black Hebrew Israelites have a reputation around New York City and around DC.
I know, but
and so they were like, no, they were the black Hebrew Israelites.
They were terrible. I recognize that.
They called Nathan Phillips an Uncle Tomahawk. They told him that God hates his people and took away their land because they worshipped false idols, right? All of this stuff. They got into it face to face, nose to nose with the natives at the Indigenous Peoples March, right? Engaging in all kinds of slurs against Native Americans, against Indigenous peoples, right? Okay. Then they turned their ire toward the Covington boys who were watching. They were like, wow, what the fuck is this shit? We haven't seen anything. We've never seen anything like this before. So some of them were kind of watching off to the side. And then they started spewing all kinds of racist bullshit at those guys and homophobic and all of this other shit, right? You're school shooters, and telling that one black kid in the group, at least the one black kid who was in the foreground of the group, right? You know, you gotta get away from these boys, these white boys. They aren't your friends. They're gonna treat you like shit. You know, you just their house nigga. You know, and they're going to steal your organs one day.
It was
right?
terrible.
And these white boys pull their friend back in, and they give him a hug, and they're like, "No, we're your friend," right? And it's like, so I mean, we are literally looking at a group of boys, okay, a group of boys at the age at which they are most likely to do stupid, reckless, retarded, violent, aggressive crap, right? Okay? That's the age that they are at. This is the age where their hormones are surging, where they don't have life experience to process every single emotion and learned how to deal with every novel social situation. And these were the kids. These kids were the only adults in the fucking room.
Yeah, it sounds like they were the only ones who exercised any moderation, any, wait and see what's going to happen, anything like that at all. They didn't. None of the adults figured out that they might want to assess these teens before they start throwing nasty language and slurs at them.
If you watch the footage, right?
You see, I watched the end of it.
No, but if you read Nick Sandman's statement, and shut up, dog. God damn it. If you read Nick Sandman's statement, and then you watch the footage, the footage conforms to what Nick Sandman said. And what Nick Sandman said was, we were being abused by these black guys, the black Hebrew Israelites, right? We were being taunted and mocked, and we thought they were trying to provoke us into a confrontation. Right? So we stood back. And then all of a sudden, Nathan Phillips and his group came along, and, you know, they walked into our group, and everyone parted ways, and everyone initially thought they were on our side, right? Everyone initially thought they were there to support us.
Yeah,
and then one of them started shouting, "You white boys need to go back to Europe."
It was at that point. That's the early part of the footage that I saw, and what I saw was it looked like the boys were trying to welcome them into the group.
At that moment, right, all of these boys who were initially sort of dancing along and clapping to the drumming and all of that stuff, right, because they thought, okay, these guys are here to support us against these assholes over there, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden they're like, what the fuck? What is even going on? Some of them even ask, what's going on here? And then when the guy says, right, to one of these Covington boys, right, go back to Europe. You don't belong here. This is not your land. You stole it from us, right? And he starts to argue and say, okay, so like you're also immigrants to this land, right? We all came from Africa. Are we all supposed to just go back to Africa, right? Is that what we need to do? And you can see Nick Sandman turn his head away from Nathan Phillips, put a frown on his face, and shake his head to indicate to his friend, do not engage. Yeah. We are in over our heads. This is a situation we do not understand. Shut the fuck up, right? So this kid, the kid who is the most vilified, the kid who is the most smeared in the media, right, is the one who was the kid wearing the biggest big kid pants in the fucking whole scenario.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like he's just standing there trying to, you know, it's not the
de-escalate a situation.
Yeah, it's just I'm going to hold my ground. I'm not going to engage with these guys. I'm just going to stand here. I'm gonna wear a, like you could even argue it's kind of a blank expression at certain points. Like, I mean, the one screenshot looks like a smirk, sure, but like a lot of the times his expression is kind of changing. It goes like blank at points, right? He's just kind of like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I'm just going to stand here, I'm going to stand my ground. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to provoke anyone. And it turns out it didn't matter, because he's apparently provoking everyone anyway, because that's all anybody can talk about.
What I love is the reaction from these people online, these allegedly grown-ass adults reacting to a bunch of teenagers as if they're back in high school, and they're still afraid of their high school bullies. But you can't look at anything objectively anymore. And of course, the video comes out, the entire video comes out. Now everyone looks like an ass, but there's still some people who are doubling down,
tripling down, quadrupling down. Yeah. Like, there's been violence, or at least threats of violence. They had like a bomb threat or something at their school. They had to evacuate. They had to close the school for a couple of days, if I understand correctly. Yep. So there's been some real serious shit done, and I hope they find out the origin of that, and whoever did it ends up, basically going to trial and getting hit with the full extent of the law, because it's just as a parent with a kid who just got done with school, with the public school system a year ago. Every time you hear about an incident in a school, and it doesn't have to be a shooting, any kind of violent incident in a school, the next thing you listen to is it local? Is my kid in danger? And have somebody make a threat like that, every parent who had a kid at that school had to be terrified.
Well, and I mean, since when is the reasonable response to anything like this? Like, just to be like, okay, yeah, we're going to go and make bomb threats against an entire school. Like, I don't like this one guy who smirked at this other guy, so we're gonna make a bomb threat against the entire school, because clearly we need to take out our anger on everybody that is even like possibly tangentially involved in this kid's life. Like, let's put aside the fact that it's already absurd to be going on Twitter or wherever else and saying, I'll give you a blowjob to punch this kid in the face. Like, I don't understand how we've even gotten to that point, how people aren't immediately saying, okay, what kind of insane monster says something like that? But now we're making bomb threats against a school and people aren't losing their damn minds? Like, is everybody going crazy? I don't understand what's going on.
I think if I had to put my tinfoil hat on, I would say that the attempt at the media grab failed, because the video came out, everybody saw that the narrative they were trying to push failed. So whoever's mad that this thing failed, maybe they're the ones that sent that bomb threat to that school.
There's a phenomenon here, though, and it's part of it starts with that you being a different thinker than me is scary idea. That I'm afraid you're wrong. I'm afraid because you're wrong. You're scary because you're wrong. And it doesn't matter whether you're actually wrong or not. If they feel like you're wrong, you're scary. So it doesn't matter if what you have done is what they accuse you of doing. It doesn't matter if the narrative of regarding your actions, it doesn't matter if the narrative regarding your attitudes, it doesn't matter if any of that is true or not. You're on the wrong side. You are in the wrong tribe, and therefore it doesn't matter. You have to be the bad guy in some way or another, and that's where the doubling down and tripling down comes in. And then it's not in the minds of the tribalists who have that attitude. It's not that, oh, you've been proved innocent. It's that you've gotten away with something because there was no evidence against you. They couldn't get you because you kept your nose clean. That's the way they look at it.
And if you're the scary one that's making them feel unsafe, you can justify a number of different violent actions against them. And it's terrible. Like, these people can take that. They can say, oh, you've made me feel unsafe. So therefore, it's okay if somebody else makes you feel unsafe, or even if I make you feel unsafe in return, because I'm just defending myself or my views or my own tribe or whatever it is. They can use this to justify almost anything. And it's ridiculous, because to anybody who's not involved in their victim mentality, they can clearly see that that's insane. Like, to say that, to see this kid standing here smirking and say that that justifies bombing school, it's like, you're obviously crazy. But they're like, no, this is what needs to happen. We need to have a revolution against this kind of thinking. And you're like, what kind of thinking? The guy was just standing there with a smirk on his face for 5 seconds and a screenshot from a video. What is your problem?
Yeah, and of course nobody is going to acknowledge what that smirk is. When you are in a location where things should be a certain way, the adults should be adults, the area should be peaceful because it is a memorial. There should be some respect for the location that you're in. People should be treating each other as human beings. Patriotism should be enough to get people who are part of the same nation to interact with each other in a respectful way, even if they disagree with each other, right? So you're in a location where things should be a certain way, and all of a sudden you realize that a pile of shit is getting dumped in your lap. And you are now expected to carry and consume that. That's your shit now, because it's been dumped on you. That is that version of it's not the I'm about to be an asshole shit-eating grin. It's the shit has been dumped on me shit-eating grin. And, that is exactly. The I just swallowed a bug look.
Yeah, no, that's what it was. I just swallowed a bug. Oh fuck, right? like if you look at him, and this is one of the things that I actually noticed when the completely innocent, unrelated person was doxxed in his stead. And then the guy's family suffered, I think, oh God, I forget what his name was. The guy's family suffered all kinds of harassment, including his parents' business receiving harassment and hostile Yelp reviews and all kinds of stuff like that, right? So there was this kid who just looked somewhat like him, who was doxxed in Nick Sandman's stead, right? Wasn't even there. Isn't part of the school. Nothing. Family suffered harassment. The day before the doxing, one of the brothers, there were 3 sons, I think, and the middle son had just gotten married, and it was the day before, and it was supposed to be sort of a day of celebration and all of this, and nope, can't do that because our son was doxed. In a case of misidentification as the smirk that set America on fire. Yeah. The new white hood, the new face of the KKK, right? All of this shit, right? Anyway, so we have this situation where, like, I'm looking at this kid's teeth compared to the other kid's teeth. So I'm looking at Nick Sandman's teeth and I'm looking at the other kid's teeth. Okay. Nick Sandman has prominent canines. He's got very, very prominent eye teeth. And so anytime he smiles, it's going to look like a smirk.
Yeah.
Anytime he smiles, the stretching of his facial tissue across those teeth is going to make him look like he's smirking.
That's true. That runs on one side of my family, not my teeth, but my husband's side of the family. And in a friendly setting, it looks adorable. I've never seen anyone in our family in a setting like that. I hope I never do. But I imagine if if my husband actually ever has I've never seen him have an expression of anger on his face. Now that I think about it, that would be intimidating as hell. But
if you're a little snaggletooth, it changes your expressions.
Yeah.
It does.
It does.
Yeah.
In fact,
Like,
he and
my
all three
daughter
kids
is
are like that,
hideously
and it really does. It makes a big difference in the way they look when they grin. They look they look mischievous. They look like they're up to something when they grin.
Yeah. No, and so we have this. Even when you smile with your mouth closed, if you have teeth that crooked, particularly your top teeth, right? If you have teeth,
it causes your face to jut out a bit differently.
Yeah, it does, and it actually makes you look. So I'm looking at this, and I'm like, it's sort of analyzing it at the macro and micro levels, and I'm thinking, is there a way that this kid could actually genuinely smile, without it looking a little bit like a smirk?
Not really.
I don't know. No, I don't know, because my stepson Matthew had those canines that stick out, half an inch further than the rest of his teeth. My daughter has them, and it really impacts what their facial expressions look like, especially when they're smiling with their mouths closed.
Yeah, no, it will always look like that, unless as he gets older, the shape of his face changes. He'll always look mischievous or ornery, or maybe even a little aggressive when he grins. And
a little bit like a Loki, yeah.
So, which people who want to view you as the bad guy will interpret anything like that as an aggressive gesture rather than just a natural characteristic. I mean, I've seen that in other situations. A lot of women have more sloping shoulders. They don't go straight across. They have a bit of a angle to them, like a clothes hanger.
Nick Redding.
Right?
Even Nick Redding has sloping shoulders.
Well, a lot of guys, though, when they have sloping shoulders, it's because of the muscles around their necks, because of their trapezius. A lot of gals, when their shoulders are sloping, it's the natural shape of their skeleton, their skeletal structure. And so if you have, God, I can't remember which is endomorph, and I think it's the exomorph that is the broad shoulders that go straight across. Like, Alison's more pronounced than I am at it, but I'm tall. And so there's this combination of tall, straight shoulders. I have been accused of being aggressive in the middle of conversations that are not even arguments because of my shoulders. And I know, I'm sure that's probably happened to Alison too, because even though she's not tall, she's actually petite. She still has that.
She has a
presence.
very wide back, and she has very broad shoulders, and she
looks very strong.
She has
pretty imposing in person.
She has incredible resting bitch face too.
No, yeah.
No, she told me this. She told me this.
She can look very angry when she's not angry, and like that's another one I have had hit me. I don't just have resting bitch face. The joke is I have resting serial killer face, and it's especially if I'm like I one of the reasons I stopped wearing contacts was because my glasses feminize me. Even when I'm wearing men's frames, when I don't have glasses on, I really have resting serial killer face. So, this I can sympathize with this kid's experience just based on having been interpreted as aggressive when I'm not doing anything, and when there's not even a conflict during which to be aggressive, and all of a sudden, why are you being aggressive about this? What made you think I'm being aggressive? Well, you're leaning forward. No, I'm not. I'm just taller than you, and I have bigger shoulders than you do.
Maybe that's why people keep saying you're a man on Twitter.
Well, I think people keep saying I'm a man on Twitter because I don't
you
react.
Report them all.
Oh, there you go.
I
yeah,
don't react to things that they expect.
You.
Yeah, people will say things to me on Twitter that they expect women to get upset about, and I'm not going to do that because it's Twitter. Like you can. Yeah. Call me names. I don't care. What you're
not going to do that because you're not going to do that because why would you be upset about that? Like I I have guys who stumble across some of my videos, which are sometimes ironically titled, right? I am a sexy woman, so stop objectifying me. Men not marrying, how deep does the problem go, right? Feminism and the disposable male, right? Okay, so, and they see the thumbnail, they see the butch haircut, right? They see a woman in a freaking tank top sitting with, you know, with her hair short and obviously comfortable Birkenstocks on. And they make assumptions, and they say things like, you look like a bull dyke or whatever, right? And every single time people respond like, you look like an idiot now, right? Because you commented without actually watching the video. But like, why would that upset me? Yeah, why would that upset me? Like, yeah. It's like, it does not bother me. Even that fucking psycho feminist who essentially said, I bet you've been training your daughter since age 10 to give head because you apparently think that's all women are good for, right? All I did was quote her comment, which she then edited, quoted her comment and said, really? We're going there? Like, that's pretty low. Ridiculous, yeah. Right? You know,
like the best thing that you have is to go after somebody else's kids. Like, what is wrong
the best with you? The best thing that you have is to make assumptions about how I raise my daughter. You know, like, because obviously I think women are only good for sucking dick, and so obviously I've been grooming my daughter and pimping her out since age 10. Like, what?
And this is the mind of a feminist. You know, I got a great one last week.
I wish she hadn't edited her comment. Yeah, because I would have loved to have seen that comment stand and be subjected to scrutiny.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a great one last week, and I responded to it because it was just hilarious. I think this was actually on the video that went sort of semi. It's not like viral, but I got like 300,000 views on that one video. It's funny because the other videos, all of the other videos on my channel are 20,000 and under. Most of them are 10,000 and under, and then that one is like 360,000 views, and it's the consent rant. And now that this woman comments on this last week, this video is old, and she's commenting on it last week. My dog wouldn't have sex with you. And so, you know, I'm sitting there thinking,
you're like, oh, well, thank God.
Yeah, that's what I said too. Thank God. I would be very upset.
I don't have to look over my shoulder for your dog.
Yeah,
yeah, don't.
Why is that even an idea? What made her think of, like, why would I want that? But and I'm sure she didn't intend for it to come across the way it came across. But I did respond something along the lines of, well, I'm very glad to hear that, because I would be very upset by any such attempt, you know. But which is probably not the response she was looking for either. But I just like the stuff that people, and then I was in a Twitter argument today, and a gal got upset over the word whore, and she expected me to be upset over it, and I wasn't, and the context in which it was used was correct, and it was essentially describing, you know, women who have sexual resources. So yeah, and during wartime, and women who betrayed their country to do so during wartime. So I don't really have a problem with that usage of it. She went off on a tangent about it, completely missed the point of this statement. She was just absolutely wrecked by the fact that this guy used the word whore in the context of making that statement. And like that part of the argument over the validity of the use of the word whore, and whether it was damaging and triggering and all that kind of stuff, that took more time than the rest of the conversation. And at one point she's like, are you seriously telling me you're not bothered by that? And I said, you know, I don't really care about name calling. Doesn't bother me, right? You call me a name, okay? either it's true or it's false, right? Either it fits or it doesn't. Okay, and if it does fit, then getting upset about it's kind of stupid. And if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't mean anything. You can call me that 1,000 times. It doesn't make me that. You know, call me Fred all you want. My name is not Fred. You cannot make me Fred by calling me Fred. Why would I get upset?
But you can just tell them that you feel unsafe, and then all of a sudden you can have them all banned. There you go. That's the way to win the argument,
and
right?
that was it.
No, I think every time that a feminist misgenders you or suggests that you're pretending to be a woman, I think you should report them. I think, you know, like, and okay, no, I am serious. I am serious because here's the thing, right? And this is a point that V makes all the time. He does not agree with these rules, but it is worse to than when you have a set of rules that are applied to everyone. Right? And when the people who impose the rules are forced to abide by them, right? That is better than a situation wherein people who are imposing the rules get off scot-free, right? And so he's just like, yeah, I'll fucking report people for breaking the terms of service and the community guidelines. Fine. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it in a heartbeat. I think we should do it, because the only way you're going to get rid of the rules is to have the people who wanted the rules in the first place to suffer for them.
You know, I've made that same point myself with respect to the reporting at, what was it, Oxford University had their, I think it was Oxford University, that put their report somebody for sexual misconduct form on their website, and it was you're right, Occidental College, and it was publicly available. Anybody could report anybody else, and I was one of the participants in the raid on that page by almost entirely. Well, the discussion about the raid was almost entirely unfortunate. I don't know. At least there was one on B, and there was one on Poll. There was some discussion on Reddit, but they really were only able to confirm a few Redditors, and I was one of them, and I wasn't discussing it on Reddit until after the fact. So I'm pretty sure it was all organized on B and Poll. Possibly some other forums as well, but those two people went nuts with it. And yeah, I mean, like, the whole point was to demonstrate to the university that it is not good to make an anonymous reporting system for your university available to the public like that. And it did. It demonstrated it very clearly. And if I remember the reports that came in that were absolutely, you know, like, that were considered false, were things like, my professor, Fatty McFatfat, yes,
sexually assaulted me.
I reported the entire cast of the Looney Tunes franchise.
Oh my gosh.
For horrific crimes, and fat shaming. You know, but because they're two-dimensional and I'm three-dimensional, and shame on me for weighing so much.
So, like, you know, and then the feminists said, oh, all these MRAs made false accusations, and it's like, yeah, false accusations that Professor Fatty McFatfat sexually assaulted me, right? Or the cast of Looney Tunes sexually assaulted me at the university, right? Yeah, no, these aren't false accusations. This is demonstrating how a tool can be abused, right, in an obvious way, so that nobody is going to get in trouble. There was nobody named, right? We were just demonstrating that this particular tool, reporting tool, could be abused by anybody with any agenda whatsoever.
Yep. And they took measures to solve that problem because of that raid. So it worked. But I still feel unsafe around Looney Tunes, especially the ones I run into on Twitter.
I guess it should be banned then.
Yes, definitely. Those, as Dread Squirrel says, those wascally wabbits. I'm gonna catch us up on the super chats because we have a shitload. So we'll start with Discord jumping in front of my tab that has the super chats. Here we go. So iBear gave us $5 in Canadian and said, "Have a great stream." And we are having a great stream. Now, I read the Hokey Bukiso one, Prim Alison. Coran Strong gave us €5 and said, "Did someone mention blowjobs? I'm here for the blowjob." And then a bomb emoji and a explosion emoji.
Okay, how is it that there are bomb and explosion emojis available?
Yeah, we just had they blew up our chat, man. It's bad enough to have your text getting blown up, but geez.
But they're available on YouTube, even though they incite terrorist attacks.
I know. I feel unsafe again. This is terrible. I don't know what to do, man. Next thing you know, I mean, hey, at least they're not eggplants.
Oh gosh, then we'd have to just shut down the show.
We've been threatened with violence, but we haven't been raped.
Shut down the show and retire to our retiring rooms.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Then we have Miles Kinslow gave us $5 and said, "Hey guys, social justice is just another excuse for prejudice. Also, loved your stream with Prince last week, Karen. Brilliant."
Sorry?
I have no idea. But Prince, did you do a stream with Prince, or was it maybe somebody else?
Oh, yeah.
They get us all mixed up sometimes.
Okay, Prince of Queens. Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Prince of Queens. Oh, okay. Hey, Xeranx gave us a whole bunch of... I
have so many streams and shows and stuff that I go on these days that it's hard to keep track of them, and I completely forgot that I had actually gone on that stream. So
that's funny. Xeranx gave us our eggplants, by the way, and then so did Capstrong. So we've had our eggplants. Now we're in trouble.
But
well,
time to go kill myself.
There you go. Kind Torment gave us $2 and said, "I believe that the smirk was inappropriate effect." Or inappropriate affect. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. I've read that before. I think I know what you're talking. Where you have the facial expression that doesn't match what you're experiencing.
Well, yeah, that's often what people do. They are feeling one thing and they try to display another in order to de-escalate a situation or not make themselves appear vulnerable or all kinds of things. They're all, when the aunt that you absolutely fucking detest who disinvited you from 2 Christmas dinners in a row because she thinks you're a misogynist, okay, and then she suddenly invites you to her son's baby shower. Yeah. And then you show up and you smile and you don't really feel it. But you're smiling because that's what's expected, right? Yeah, no, that's you're putting on an affectation, right? And I'm much better at it at age 48 now than I was at age 16 of putting on those kinds of affectations. To smooth the social waters, to apply social lubricant, to get along with other people, to not antagonize or cause conflicts that will escalate, all of those things, right? Much better at it now than I was when I was in high school. So, I mean, the fact that it may have been an inappropriate affectation, right? Of his emotions, or a way of hiding. Why are you licking a coffee cup, dog? Fuck off. But
was there coffee in it?
Not in this one. And it's the other dog that really actually gets her tongue right down into the coffee cups, even though coffee is toxic to dogs. She can't stay away from it. But when you're looking at kids who are these are kids, they're fucking teenagers, right? When I was that age, one of my classmates almost convinced me to take a shit on my vice principal's lawn. We were walking home from a party. We'd been drinking underage. I had just talked to the police because we were at a party that the police had come to, and everybody had just like fled, right? And some of us had... Oh my God. People coming home. Some of us had gone through a private golf course, walked across this private golf course, and the police car comes along behind me, and I'm not running, I'm just walking, right? And he says, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, I was at a party, I'm walking home. And he says, "You realize this is private property?" I'm like, "I didn't realize that. Thank you for letting me know. I think there's an exit over there. I'll go straight to it." And he was like, "Well, that's fine." Right. And then going to that exit, I had to walk by Mr. Sadaway's house, who was he was the vice principal, and he was my personal disciplinarian for all three years of high school. And he was atrocious and joyless. And my friend said, "I dare you to take a shit on his lawn." And I was like, well, the house lights are off. I'd probably get away with it. But then I was like, but there's cop cars crawling all over the neighborhood after breaking up that party. And it would be really embarrassing to try to explain that to my parents.
Yeah.
But it would really feel satisfying to do it, right? And I had to actually think about whether I wanted to take a shit on the vice principal's lawn, right? At 1 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night when I was 16 years old. Right? So we're talking, this is the age of the kids we're talking about.
As the dog describes your agony in the background.
I'm ready to fucking murder this dog. I am ready to murder her. Right? And if she was out, she's in the crate because she can't be trusted unattended. But if she was out of the crate, she'd be doing the exact same thing, only more.
Yeah. And she'd probably be doing it closer to the microphone.
Yes. No, she'd be walking around, drinking my coffee, and barking in my face until I squirt her.
So she would be like a boss. Anyway.
She's personality disordered is what she is, so...
So I shouldn't say that now. I should have said that 6 years ago when I had a boss that acted like that. But now I actually like my boss a lot. So, but anyway, yeah, the whole thing with the facial expression, I see this as this is like I said, this is what happens when you essentially have to swallow something that you don't want to swallow. You know, not to put too fine of a point on it, but I imagine women who don't like to swallow get that expression on their face too. And in his case, he was swallowing a situation and behavior from adults that was not as good as the behavior he would have expected from adults.
Right now, these people are supposed to be in, like, the older, mature people.
Well, white kids in the Midwest grow up getting taught that Native American elders are wise, and that guy was not anything near wise in his choices that day. So, yeah. Anyway, we will go on with Ziranx gave us $5 and said, "I understand the aversion to being told to smile by feminists now. Also, the Captain Marvel trailers make sense. Ready for March." I actually haven't seen the trailers, so I don't know.
Oh God, it looks so dull. It's just, oh God, I'm terrible with names, but the main actress, Brie Larson, I think it is, just looks like a blank pole the entire time. Like you could paint a board with a slightly nonplussed face on it, and it would be more dynamic than she looks in that trailer. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah,
it just looks boring.
I remember Brie Larson, I'm pretty sure is the right, because I remember when it came out that she was playing Captain Marvel and there was some big hullabaloo. I think actually what it was there was a manufactured hullabaloo by feminists and a bunch of people going, no, we didn't say any of that stuff. which actually is what happens with a lot of the superhero stuff. But I really don't know. To be honest, I don't know jack or shit about Captain Marvel. I've never been a big fan of really very many of the female superheroes. If you would pick a superhero and say, well, if you're going to be a fan of a superhero, who would it be? It would be Spider-Man. And I liked the Spider-Man of the 60s. So that's basically in the cartoons.
I used to watch those with my dad all the time.
That's the extent of my superhero fandom. That and there was a comic series, Superman's friend Jimmy Olsen. And Jimmy Olsen was a news photographer, so you can see why I like that character. But that's about it. That's the extent of me and superhero comics. If it didn't have like really campy horror stories in it with things that came out of swamps or stories about that old guy in the hotel that's dating the hot young chick and the jealous guy that steals the girl and then finds out she's actually a succubus that drains your life out of you, and he's the next really old guy dating the young hot chick. That's my kind of comic. And that's it. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, there was a whole funny thing with that situation too, where somebody photoshopped a smile on her and everybody lost their frickin' minds over it. It was pretty absurd, but it's like, okay, I guess, if somebody photoshops a smile on you, then you can just say that you feel unsafe and then you're good to go.
Yeah. Yep, that's it. That's going to be my go-to from now on. I'm sorry, but you can't argue any feminist rhetoric in here. Feminist rhetoric makes me feel unsafe. That's actually closer to true, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that character, like, I just can't bring myself to get all up in arms over it because I don't have any personal investment in the character, the story, any of that. Although I think it's dumb if feminists are trying to stir people to get up in arms over it. That's really not of any value.
Yeah, it really doesn't look like there's much to get up in arms about with what I've seen so far. I know nothing about the character either, so I don't really care one way or the other. I just know that whatever is going on, it looks boring because it looks like nobody who's acting in the film could care less at all. So there you go.
Yeah. Oh, and apparently Tyler Preston says I would be majorly disappointed with what the Supergirl TV show did to Jimmy Olsen. I'm not watching that now. I don't want to get pissed off. So, Schrodinger's cat either did or did not give us £5. When I was a teenager, he says...
We won't know. We won't know until the super chat actually comes out. Yeah, whether the dollars exist or don't exist.
Well, it's pounds, so they definitely are not dollars. We know that.
Oh, well, but whether they exist or don't exist, we will not know until we receive the contents of the box.
There you go. When he says, when I was a teenager, I studied karate. One of my instructors, a woman, used to always say, if you always think you're a victim, that's all you will be. What comes to mind is the meme from the Addams Family movie, the newer Addams Family movie with, I can't remember what the little girl's name was. Wednesday and the little, I can't remember what the little girl, the normie girl, the blonde, what her name was, but they were standing on the docks, practicing lifeguard stuff, and each pairing had one person that was supposed to be the lifeguard, and the other person was supposed to be the drowning victim. So the normie girl says, "I'll be the victim," and Wednesday's like, "Every day of your life." Or all your life. And that just makes me think of that. That's so common too. And it's true too. If you think of yourself as a victim all the time, you never get to be anything else. What did this jump for? We must have gotten another new super chat because my page moved.
We did.
Yeah, I'm getting trolled by Google. Google's an asshole. Mr. Roboto gave us $2 and said, "Hi, Prim, how's work? Hi, Karen, how do dogs miss them?"
Well, I mean, I've been off work for a couple of weeks now, but seemingly unnecessarily because the little one has yet to show up yet, but hopefully soon.
You know the advice I gave you, Prim.
I do.
I expect you to take that advice.
The little one is not coming out into a world of feminist rhetoric because she feels unsafe.
There we go. That's what's going on.
She really likes mommy right now.
I promise you, my advice will not give her brain damage, nor will it give her nightmares
not
for the
unless
rest of
she does it wrong.
Exactly.
But that's my advice. It worked for 2 kids with me.
There you go.
Yeah, who were overdue.
And the next super chat's perfect. French Honey Badger gave us $2 and said, "He's just standing there menacingly."
Menacingly. He is,
you know,
he is the smiling menace, the smirking menace, the grinning menace.
He's got to get together and hang out with my friend from the 7 Years in Hell case, because he was a master of the art of waving menacingly, according to his accuser.
Yeah. I've actually met you guys who have been, oh God, who was it? Oh, fuck. He actually became a delegate for his state, a state delegate, a congressional delegate. Gordon Smith? Anyway, his case was written up. He had a wife, an ex-wife, named Tracy Smith, who lodged 13 false allegations against him. Yeah, that resulted in 8 arrests, but no, they stayed the charges every time.
Every
blah,
time,
blah, blah.
yeah.
Then finally,
the pattern.
One of those cases was him waving menacingly to his children in the parking lot of the local grocery store.
Yeah.
And she was finally stopped in her campaign against him when she presented herself at the emergency room with fresh injuries and said, "He beat me up in the alley 2 blocks away." Right? That's what he did. I know it was him. He beat me up in the alley 2 blocks away. Right? And then I walked here. Right? And so it was like they could fix a frickin' time frame. Right? Based on what she said. And the fact that he had been ordered by the court despite never being charged and never actually, never being charged, let alone being convicted of anything. He had been ordered by the court to wear an ankle bracelet. And she did not realize that. And his ankle bracelet placed him miles and miles and miles away from the scene of the crime, where she punched herself in the face multiple times and then walked to the emergency room and made her allegation. And that was the one where they finally were like, "Okay, lady, if you keep this up, we're actually going to charge you with something."
See, at least they threatened to charge her with something. In the 7 Years case, of course, that was brought up numerous times by the victim's attorney, where he said, you know, "Can we do anything?" And she brought up in court, his attorney brought up in court, you know, "Hey, she has filed false complaints with the police. She has lied to police during investigations. She has stalked the guy she claims is abusing her. She has harassed his witnesses. She has assaulted family pets. And she has perjured herself in court." And it wasn't like there is doubt as to whether what she said or is true or not, or, you know, she said something that she could have just been mistaken. It was blatant, obvious, and irrefutable that she was lying, and that she knew she was lying, and she got away with it. And they allowed it. They're like, "Well, we can't do anything. It's against policy to enforce laws that are going to penalize a domestic violence victim. Well, she's not a domestic violence victim.
Yeah.
She's a false accuser exploiting the system who has never actually gotten a conviction on him. Because every single time she's made an accusation, documentation has proved the accusation false. But yeah, that was the situation, and that was one of the things. Was this woman had she had just delayed a hearing for child support. She had lost. The reason she was putting him through all this was that she had lost custody of their child to him. The child was abused by her second husband. They weren't married yet at the time, so basically her second guy, her next guy. And the good wife basically had the wherewithal. She just amazing person, really, to take pictures. She actually kept it together well enough to document the injuries. I would have been a pile of blubber seeing the kid's face, the way that it looked, and just she was covered in bruises. And this was a little girl. Like she had the kind of cuteness that Shirley Temple had. Just the great big doe eyes and everything. Little kid that looked completely innocent. A little Precious Moments kid, covered in bruises. But that picture got Child Protective Services to suck up their gynocentrism toward the mother. And actually give, advice that the father should have protective custody. Boom. Instant formula for a bunch of false accusations. Well, the biological mother then owed child support. And she got way behind, like $8,000 behind. And they wouldn't go after her. Finally they did. And she got the hearing delayed by claiming that she was going to be in another state visiting family of the guy that had beaten the child, who she had been ordered by the court to stay away from. But they shared a baby together. They had a baby together. So she was claiming she was taking the baby to see his family halfway across the country. And, couldn't afford to pay her child support, but she could afford to take that trip. So they delayed the child support hearing 2 weeks. And when they delayed the child support hearing 2 weeks, in the middle of that 2 weeks, when she was supposed to be out of state, she called the cops and accused him of a drive-by greeting that never happened, during which he allegedly waved menacingly at a bar that she couldn't possibly actually be at, because she was supposed to be halfway across the country in another state. And wow. he got brought in for questioning. They don't arrest. They bring you in for questioning. So they don't have to redo your rights, and they don't have to treat you like a human being. They can keep you longer than they're supposed to keep you, and delay giving you access to your phone call and your lawyer and all of that, because they just taken you in for questioning. You're not under arrest. But you're not free to go either.
The thing with Gordon Smith was that he had these 8 arrests, right? That never amounted to... A dog! Shut up!
You scared the dog when you said 8 arrests.
That never amounted to anything, right? And, but in Vermont, I believe it was Vermont, he's since moved, I think, down to Georgia or something like that, right? But in Vermont, prospective employers, when they do a criminal background check, they don't just see your convictions. They actually have access to see whether you've ever been arrested for something, right? And he had these 8 arrests on his record that made it impossible for him to get a job, because these are 8 domestic violence arrests, right? Yeah. And so essentially the guy was just like, he said at an event, I don't remember which, I could probably find it on YouTube. But he said, I went to bed one night in America and I woke up the next morning in Pyongyang.
It's just terrible that can be allowed to happen like that.
Yep. Yep. But you know, if you talk about these things and you highlight,
you make people feel unsafe.
Yeah, if you highlight these problems, the domestic
women.
Violence victims advocates feel unsafe.
Yeah, you make women feel unsafe. You make one of the things too that I was just on Reddit describing, because there was the case in Ireland fairly recently of the panties, right? A defendant got away with it, a rape defendant got away with it, quote unquote, because panties, right? Because the 17-year-old victim, the 17-year-old complainant rather, had worn lacy thong panties. And at one point during the closing arguments, right, the defense lawyer brought up, right, clearly, these panties are not, they're not like everyday run-of-the-mill panties. They're panties that are going to be worn by a woman who maybe wants somebody to see her panties, right? And so that formed part of the closing arguments, is the lacy, sexy nature of these thong panties, right? And somebody on Reddit said, okay, well, here's this case. Here's this case of this poor girl who was slut-shamed and all of this, and there was this horrible and I was just like, you're going to have to show me the transcripts of the trial, right? You're going to have to show me. Stop!
Your dog is just punctuating your determination there.
You're going to have to show me the transcripts, right? You're going to have to show me some interviews with the jurors, right? That indicates that these panties even affected their decision, let alone formed the sole basis of it, right? Because we had a case a few years ago in Canada regarding Judge Robin Camp, right? He was adjudicating a sexual assault trial, and he acquitted the guy. But at some point, midway through the complainant's testimony, oh my freaking God! Here, something. Oh my God! Stop it! There are people walking outside.
They're making your dog feel unsafe.
Anyway, so at some point during the complainant's testimony, she's describing what happened to her, right? And she says, "Oh, I was at this house party and I was drunk and I went to the bathroom to puke, and then I was surfing on my phone for about 20 minutes, locked in the bathroom, and then he snuck in ninja style, ninja-like, right? And announced that he was going to have sex with me, and then he put me on the vanity. He lifted me up and he put me on the vanity, and he pulled my jeans down around my ankles, my skinny jeans down around my ankles, and so my bum was hanging down in the vanity, in the sink basin, right? And so he gave me oral sex, and then he raped me with his penis in my vagina while my bottom was hanging down in the sink. And the judge is trying to visualize this. Okay. Judge Camp is trying to visualize this. There's a woman sitting in a sink, right, with her vagina pressed up against the front wall of the basin, and her knees pressed together by the side walls of the basin, and her ankles held together by her skinny jeans, which are still around her ankles. Okay, and somehow this man has found a way to insinuate his head in between the front wall of the basin and her vagina to give her oral sex. And then his incredible anaconda of a penis has managed to insinuate its way in between her closed thighs and her held together ankles and the wall of the basin and her vagina, which is pressed up against it in order to actually penetrate her.
So
right?
he's part elephant.
Yeah, his judge is trying desperately to understand the mechanics of this situation. And he asks, and I'm paraphrasing as close as possible to what I remember from the transcript. Why didn't you just sink your bottom down, keep your bottom down in the basin? Why didn't you just keep your knees together? Okay. And then, of course, during the rest of the trial, right? And she then changes her story and says, well, you know, and then he lifted me up and, you know, and so it was like, and then my leg was over his shoulder and all of this other stuff, right? But, okay, so those were clarifying questions, okay? Like, why, how could he rape you if your ass was in a fucking sink, right? And your knees were pressed together by the walls of that sink, and your ankles were tied together by your skinny jeans. How could this actually physically occur, right? Okay, so, but he used that unfortunate phrase, "keep your knees together." Okay, so after he heard all of the testimony from all of the other witnesses, all of whom corroborated the defendant's story and disconfirmed the complainant's story, right? That all of the other witnesses said that there were 4 people in the bathroom. They were all smoking a joint. The defendant and the complainant were getting friendly and frisky with each other. The complainant's friend, longtime friend, asked her, "Are you guys going to have sex?" And she said, yes. And they said, okay, well, we'll just leave now, right? And then one person, the owner of the apartment, accidentally walked in on the 2 of them having sex in the shower, right? And then went, oh, crap, and walked out. And the brother of the defendant, the half-brother of the defendant, walked in on them and essentially told this girl through the shower door, "I'm going to tell everybody what a slut you are," because he was apparently sweet on her and his brother fucked her instead, right? So I'm going to tell everybody what a slut you are, right? And then this girl goes back to partying, right? And it's only after the rumors start circulating that she was a big old slut that she decides to go and march herself down to the police station and report that, and I quote, this is what she said in her statement to police. Yeah, I just wanted to whatever. I don't care when he did that to me, like I wanted him to do it. That was what she said about the sex. All of her anger and complaint was about the brother besmirching her reputation.
So she basically went to report the brother for smearing her, and the police turned it into a rape charge?
Oh, don't even freaking get me started. The police turned it into a rape charge, right? And then it went to court. And then Judge Camp said that unfortunate thing in the middle of the first witness's testimony, right? Trying to figure out how the fuck did this even happen with her bum down in a sink, right?
Well, at least he's smarter than a certain Dayton area judge who can't figure out that it's highly unusual for a man to have 3 hands.
There you go. But here you go.
Yeah.
Here you go. Okay, so he asks this question, right? It's worded in such a way that you just know everybody's going to lose their minds, okay? But he's trying to figure out the mechanics of the situation. Then he hears all of this testimony from everybody else and reads the police report that said, yeah, like, I don't care when he did that to me. Like, I wanted him to do it, right? I'm really actually mad at his brother, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And he's like, okay, so I have to acquit. And then he had not been, he had no experience adjudicating sexual assault cases, this judge, right? So the prosecutor had generously offered to help him, right, by apprising him of sexual assault law. So at one point, she says to him, he says, I'm actually just going to find it right here, because this case is so fucking unbelievable. He says, so anyway, everyone believes, okay, so he says, I believe his version of events. His version of events is that the sex was consensual. This is what he's telling the prosecutor. The prosecutor, Ms. Mograby, if you care to know, please don't get on the wrong side of her in Alberta, says it's not enough that you can't reject his version. It's not enough that you have a reasonable doubt. And the judge says, okay, but what I'm saying is I actually believe his version over hers. Right? And then she says, sure, but even that's not enough. The sex happened behind closed doors without witnesses. There's no way for anyone to know beyond a reasonable doubt that the sex was consensual, and therefore we must assume it was not. Okay.
Is that the law?
No.
I figured.
But she's advising a judge that she knows is inexperienced, right? She's advising him in what is the law, and this is what she's telling him, right? And then the judge says, well, now I have to apply the error of reality test, right? Particularly in light of the fact that all of the evidence other than the complainant's testimony supports the defendant's version of events. If I am to reject all of that evidence wholesale, I must essentially assume there is no universe in which any young woman might choose to have consensual sex with a man on brief acquaintance at a party. Is that what you're asking me to do, to assume that such a thing could never happen? Okay, so he acquitted this defendant, not based on the fact that she didn't hold her knees together, but based on the totality of the evidence, which is why, since there's no double jeopardy prohibition in Canada, when the prosecutor got their appeal and their retrial, and the guy was retried, right, he was acquitted a second time, because the acquittal was not based on that one fucking sentence fragment from the 25 fucking hours of testimony. Okay? But when this guy was acquitted the first time, guess what happened? Feminists and the press isolated that sentence fragment and essentially said, this guy got away with it because rape myths. The judge said, why didn't you hold your knees together? And that means he was essentially saying, why weren't you just a big old slut? Right? And on top of this, the prosecutor argued that the testimony of the friend of this girl, where she said, I asked her if they were going to have sex, and she said yes, and so that's when we left the bathroom. The prosecutor said not only was it hearsay and should be excluded, which is completely fucking wrong, okay, but she said it falls under section 276 of the Rape Shield protections, okay, which is it would introduce her prior sexual history. So
that's not prior.
Literally things she said 90 seconds before having sex with this guy, things she directly told a witness, yes, I intend to have sex with this guy, right? That falls under Rape Shield protections because it's introducing prior sexual history. Okay, right? Like, and this prosecutor is not under investigation, but you know what happened? Judge Camp was completely destroyed in the media. He was completely destroyed in the press, right? The Canadian Judicial Council recommended he be fired from his job, right? He stepped down voluntarily in order to avoid being forced from the bench, right? He is currently fighting for his right to practice law in this province. all over a case where a guy was tried twice over a false accusation that any normal person who actually read the fucking transcript, who actually was sitting in the fucking courtroom listening to the testimony, right, would know was a false accusation, that the police report indicates was a false accusation, right? Anybody would say this kid, Alexander Scott Wagar, right? 21 years old or something like that at the time, spent 2.5 years in jail awaiting his second acquittal. His mother died months before that acquittal. He was not able to visit her, right? This kid who had 2.5 years of his life robbed from him, and yet we're supposed to feel like this woman is still the victim. She is still the victim of this circumstance, right? This guy got away with it, and to say anything otherwise makes rape victims feel unsafe.
There you go.
The second acquittal.
We're all unsafe.
The prosecutor said it was a miscarriage of justice and that it would have a chilling effect on rape victims. Well, maybe it wouldn't if you actually released the details of what actually fucking happened and you weren't promoting some fucking false narrative that the only reason why he was acquitted was because some judge is still living in the 1950s and thinks women should keep an aspirin between their knees when they go to parties. God, I'm so furious.
And nobody ever worries. Nobody ever worries about, what will happen when the vast majority of young men feel safe being alone with the vast majority of young women. When MGTOW outnumber incels, when MGTOW outnumber normies.
Well, and I mean, like, what about saying, the people that make false accusations make me feel unsafe? Because what if something happens, if something were to happen to me and I went to the police and all of a sudden it's like, oh, how likely are we to believe this person? Because, yeah, exactly, right? Like, there's going to come a point where, a lot of people are starting to look at these cases and be like, okay, but, did that really happen, though? Because there are already people who are regarding sexual assault cases like that now, right? So we are already beginning to be like, okay, but, is this something that really happened, or is this one of your listen and believe kind of things?
Yeah.
Because there are so many people who are making it up for various reasons.
Well, I'll tell you what makes me feel unsafe is the idea that if you are accused of a crime, that you don't have the legal right to a robust and complete defense. That there are laws on the books, and I don't care what crime it is. I don't care if it like anything from getting a speeding ticket right on up to mass murder. There should not be laws on the books that say any kind of potentially exculpatory evidence cannot be submitted. There should not be laws on the books that say that in any way hinder your right to confront your accuser in a court of law. There should not be laws on the books limiting what kind of questions can be asked of the accuser by the defense attorney. None of those things should be limited. The evidence should all be admissible. The only thing that should affect the admissibility of evidence is if it is illegally gathered by law enforcement in violation of the rights of the accused. And frankly, I'm not even 100% sure that should be inadmissible. I think the officers that do that should just go to jail instead. Because that would stop them from doing it.
I think honestly, here's the thing, right? Because prior sexual history is inadmissible, but you find in rape trials all over the place, right? The prosecutors bringing in the prior
criminal history,
the prior lack of sexual history on the part of the victims, right? So essentially, you know, were you a virgin, right? And yes, I was. And that's bringing in prior sexual history. That's bringing in that thing. And that's really the reason why prior sexual history of the woman, of the complainant, has always been a thing up until recently, is because essentially what you have is a situation where prosecutors really love the idea of bringing that in when the prior sexual history of the complainant is virtuous, it's virginal, it's, you know, she is somebody. It bolsters their case, because you essentially say, well, this is a 23-year-old woman who's never consented to sex with anybody before, right? And so there's no reason to assume that she would consent to sex with anybody now, right? And while I think that that is equally fallacious, right? I think that that's an equally fallacious thing. If they're allowed to bring that in, if the prosecution is allowed to bring it in that the complainant really, she's a virgin and she's 23 years old and she was saving herself for marriage and all of this stuff, right? Then the defense should be able to bring in, she banged every other member of the football team.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and essentially, like, so it doesn't necessarily, you know, but when you look at something like the panties in Ireland, I told this person on Reddit, you know, you can't assume that informed the jurors' decisions, because everybody in Canada assumes that this poor kid, Alexander Wagar, right, got away with it because rape myths, when that is not what happened. That is in no way what happened, right? Somebody said something unfortunate and awkward during the trial, right? Somebody said something that could be taken out of context during the trial, right? There is no, unless you have those transcripts, unless you know all the details of the case, unless you know everything about this, right? And unless you are not going by what the media and the activists are telling you about these panties, you have no way of knowing the jurors made their decision based on those panties. You have no idea whether the jurors even freaking thought about those panties.
Yeah, that is true. And you know, in my opinion, all of the evidence should be admissible. It should be up to the attorneys to argue whether that evidence is relevant and whether it has the implications
what kind of weight
that the other side is claiming, and how much weight those implications should be given. Yeah, and I don't think it should be up to. I don't think it should be up to the court to decide, you know, witnesses can't see, or not witnesses, but jurors can't see some of the information. And I don't think the court should refuse to consider information. I think that should be, because it is the defense's right, it is the defendant's right to have a robust and complete defense. And if he's denied that, then you end up with the state being able to jail people on the basis of flimsy or openly false accusations. And you know, a lot of feminists do not understand what they are actually working into place there is not just power for women to use against men. They are working into place, yes, a power for the state to use against the people. And if it is reasonable for women to be able to wield that power against men, where men's rights to exculpatory evidence being presented in their defense, to all of those other things I mentioned, the right to consult with your attorneys, all of the various aspects of due process rights that have been infringed in cases of intimate partner and sexual violence, even the right to have some legal recourse against your accuser if your accuser commits perjury in the course of attempting to get you convicted of a crime. Those things are sacred in order to prevent the state from abusing its power by wrongfully jailing people on flimsy charges as punishment for dissent.
Not wrongfully jailing people, wrongfully kidnapping people and engaging in illegal forcible confinement and illegal forcible restraint, right? That this is what the state is doing if it is not acting with just cause. And so that's why the burden is so high on the state. And what frustrates me, right? Because I was looking at a, it was a paper that was sort of summarizing 40 years of rape reform law. And one of the cases really stuck out for me, right? There was a young white woman in her early 20s, and she claimed that she had been raped by a black man. And this was back in the 80s, I believe. So interracial dating wasn't really much of a thing, and also shacking up wasn't much of a thing back then, right? So nobody would assume, that she might be dating a black guy or might be shacking up with a black guy. Anyway, so the only physical evidence in that case was a pubic hair from a black man that was found on her cervix. This was before DNA. And she testifies on the stand that she was not sexually active and not dating anyone, and she was living at home with her mother at the time of the assault, when in reality the judge and the prosecutor and the defense, okay, so everybody knew that that was a lie, right? Because at the time that the assault took place, she was living in sin with her black boyfriend. Okay, so here we have another perfectly reasonable explanation as to how a pubic hair from a black man found its way onto her cervix, right? Okay, so the defense argued that because the prosecution had opened the door to that line of questioning, right, had essentially allowed perjury to stand, right, that, he had evidence that this was not the case, and he should be allowed to pursue this line of cross-examination, and he was denied that right. He was denied that right because that would cause her embarrassment, because it would reveal her sexual history. And so I don't know. I don't think the paper that I was reading actually indicated whether this black defendant was convicted or acquitted, but the evidence that she was living in sin and sexually active with a black man was not allowed to be pursued because the judge ruled it inadmissible as it was part of her sexual history. It was subject to rape shield protections, and it could not be admitted into evidence, and her perjury was allowed to stand as fact.
So it is entirely possible that a guy was convicted based on her perjury then, and even if he wasn't, it did detract from his ability to defend himself by pointing to the fact that this could have come from somebody other than him. And
it was
the really
evidence.
One thing that's important to pay attention to, prior to DNA testing, there was a type of expert witness that basically did hair comparisons. Does this hair look like other hairs that can be confirmed to come from this person? Well, it has since been very clearly demonstrated through DNA testing, to be completely unreliable. And it's very unreliable with hair types that are drier, or hair types that are curlier, or men's hair is weathered a lot of times because of working outdoors or being active outdoors.
And not using conditioning.
Right. So if the guy is black and he has curly hair, or if he's a redhead, because if he's a redhead, it's hard as hell to find two hairs that look alike on a redhead's head.
My hair is like 2/3 blonde and fine.
Yeah.
And 1/6 freaking wavy and brown, and 1/6 essentially pubic hair growing out of my head.
Yeah, and I have similarly weird hair. And the reason that I know about the difficulty of actually getting a hair match is because when I was in college, I had friends that were in the police academy at my university, the second one I attended, and I helped them practice some of their forensic techniques that they were learning. And one of them was hair matching. And one of our other friends was a redhead with spirally curls that I was just insanely jealous of. But in any case, she couldn't produce a result that would help with the class because they literally could not find a match on her head that would place her at the pretend crime scene. She couldn't get two hairs that they could compare and actually get the results they wanted. I could, because I knew how to look for two matching hairs on my head. She couldn't understand. She just pulled out two random hairs, couldn't understand the assignment and that kind of thing. But it was hard as hell going through my hair and even finding two that matched, that I thought matched closely enough without looking at them under a microscope. So, like, I gave him a whole handful of hair. I've always had a lot of hair. But in any case, that is like the... and then the other thing is if there's been any kind of hair dye, any kind of chemical treatment, anything like that, that screws it up. So like the hair matching thing is incredibly inaccurate. It's almost completely worthless.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, you look at fingerprints or retina scans or things like that, and they seem to work and they seem to be reliable, but hair matching is absolutely, all it can do is essentially, it can maybe give you similar results to what paternity tests used to be before DNA testing, which is, could this baby have been produced by these two people with these two blood profiles, right? A positive and O negative or whatever, right? So essentially what you're looking at is a coin toss, right? And there have been men who have been convicted of, based on hair samples that like, and the fact that, like, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at what's going on in Canada. I am looking at everything, Bill C-51, Bill C-337, Bill C-16, right? All of these bills, right, that are social justice bills, and Bill C-51, if anybody wants to know how horrific that is, I suggest you just search on YouTube, Karen Strawn, NCFM, National Coalition for Men, NCFM, presentation, right? Just search that on YouTube, listen to that speech. It is an abomination. This bill, it has passed. It has gotten past the Senate, the sober second thought of the Senate. And it now only requires royal assent. So, so a signature by the Queen's representative. And so maybe it's already gone through that. But this is essentially an omnibus bill that would make multiple changes to sexual assault law that would make caressing your partner while they're sleeping illegal. That case was based on a known false allegation, malicious false allegation, and that the precedent that's based on, it would make any communication of a sexual nature or for a sexual purpose, so a text message or a message by Pony Express or cups with strings that was delivered beforehand saying, I want to have sex with you, and then immediately afterwards a message saying, by, I don't know, mimeograph, telegraph, photocopied in triplicate, registered mail, that I had a great time and let's do this again sometime soon, right? All of those would be subjected to rape shield testing. But not only that, but that complainants and their attorneys, which will be provided by the state, now will have standing in rape shield hearings, which will, of course, allow them to look at all of the exculpatory evidence beforehand, and it will taint their testimony. That's apparently an okay thing to do now. Taint the testimony of prosecution's witnesses, and it would make affirmative consent the law in Canada. So if I'm standing at the sink doing dishes and my boyfriend comes up to me and grabs my bum and I say I'm not in the mood, he's already committed a sexual assault.
And yet,
and here's the thing. All of the proponents of these changes say, well, prosecutorial discretion will protect people from women who, from instances where the women were really consenting, right? But I don't understand how they can say that when one of these precedents that's going to be instantiated in law, right? RVJA, you can look it up. I think it came down in 2011, right? Essentially was a case of a woman and a man who were BDSM enthusiasts, right? In the course of sexual relations one night, J.A. choked his partner unconscious, and then while she was unconscious for about 3 minutes, he tied her up and inserted a dildo up her bum. And then she woke up and he untied her and removed the sex toy, and they continued having hot, sweaty, kinky sex for the rest of the evening, right, for several hours. And then a couple of months later, they had an epic end of the relationship fight in which he threatened to seek custody of their young son. And here's the thing, the actual text of the decision it actually says it that way. He threatened to seek custody of their young son, right? And so then she marched herself down to the police station and she said, 2 months ago, we were having sex, and, I totally agreed to be choked unconscious, and I totally agreed to be tied up while I was unconscious, but I wasn't really bargaining for a dildo up my bum.
That crossed the line?
That crossed the line. Right? Okay, so she says this to the police, and so he's convicted in the lower court, right? And then, of course, he appeals, because during the trial, she essentially said, well, he didn't really necessarily do anything I didn't want him to do. He was he's going to go for custody of the kid. What was I supposed to do? Right? Okay. So he got his appeal, and the conviction was overturned on appeal because he never went outside the scope of her consent. Okay. And she made the accusation maliciously. It was false. It was factually false. And she made it for malicious purposes, right? So we have this situation, right, with the appellate court. They're like, okay, well, let him out of jail, and conviction overturned, right? He's acquitted now, right? But the dissenting judge, there was one, and I think it was the male judge, and this makes me want to fucking punch men in the testicles. Okay? He says, but is it really valid under the law for somebody to consent in advance to sexual acts that will occur while you're unconscious? And so the whole thing fucking referred up to the Supreme Court of Canada, which decided that a person's yes in fact means no in law.
Because of the unconsciousness factor.
Yeah, because under Canadian law, consent is defined as a contemporaneous, ongoing process of continual consent, uninterrupted consent, right? So essentially, even though this woman, there were times that evening that she did not have a state of mind at all, there was no point during that evening that her state of mind was not one of consent. Okay?
Yes, so much for all those people that have fetishes that rely on.
I know, as if people who are into BDSM don't have complicated enough sex lives, right?
Right.
Okay, everything they do is criminal,
yeah,
right?
Now their consent is invalid.
Yeah.
It's invalid. Their consent, in fact, is invalid in law. These are the things that are coming down the pike. These are the things, right, that should make people in Canada feel unsafe, right? Because if I wake up my boyfriend with morning head, okay, which I haven't done in a long time because we've been together for a few years and, you know, I'm just getting lazy and stuff. But if I were to do that, even if he requested it of me, right, I am a criminal, in fact, under the law, right? If he kisses me awake in the morning or presses his erection up against my bum in the morning, right, when he's spooning me, hell, fuck, even spooning me might be illegal now, right?
Oh, God.
Okay, if he does that, I can have him prosecuted. And the whole idea, right, from these frickin' advocates who are pushing for this bullshit, right, is that prosecutorial discretion will protect you. Well, it didn't protect J.A., did it?
And feminists won't allow prosecutorial discretion to protect anybody, because the minute the prosecutor decides that there is a reason to doubt the accuser's story, the prosecutor is now a misogynist who makes women feel unsafe.
So it didn't protect J.A., right? It didn't protect him from going back to jail for 2 years, right? Because he did what his fucking partner asked him to do, right? Yeah, no, that didn't protect him. And it also didn't protect Alexander Wagar, right? From a woman who said, yeah, I don't care when he did that to me. Like, I wanted him to do it. That's what she told the police!
Yep. So that's the situation. I feel unsafe is being used to shove this kind of thing into place. I feel unsafe is being used to argue against dissenting opinions on the topic of law changes like this. I feel unsafe is being used to shut down anti-Me Too hysteria. I feel unsafe is essentially being used to railroad society away from our due process rights, our free speech rights, our rights to autonomy. You don't have the right to consent to sex if you're a woman now. It's not just that men don't have due process rights. Women don't have the right to consent to sex. You can't consent to sex in Canada. Because it doesn't matter if you do. If you do consent to sex, your consent is not valid under the law.
Yeah,
and it's because feminists feel unsafe if you have those rights.
It's fucking insane. I am living in a fucking nightmare land here in Canada. Like, okay, you guys down in the States, okay, this is coming for you. This is coming for you because in every single case with cultures that share a tradition of English common law, right? When Australia decides they're going to do something, everybody else thinks that's great idea.
Well, that must be the thing to do now. Let's all do that.
Canada does something, everybody else is like, oh, sure, let's try that.
Well,
right?
we gave everybody the Violence Against Women Act herpes of domestic, intimate partner and sexual violence law, so now everybody gets to turn around and give us the no due process rights, no legal consent syphilis, I guess.
It's fucking unbelievable. I like literally, and here's the most horrific thing, is the Department of Justice website that was set up to explain to the public what Bill C-51 was all about actually said what the aim of the bill was to make it as impossible as possible for a defendant to mount an affirmative defense.
And that should have been a red flag right there. That should have had the public so up in arms that they were protesting in the streets. Because you think about it, you take one area of law and you make it okay for the state to say, no, you cannot mount a positive defense. You are now telling the state, hey, you know, we're okay with not being able to do this, and you can transfer that to other areas of law now too.
Oh, you can.
You know.
Yeah, that's a
So let's go ahead
thing
and
to
transfer
say.
that to tax law, huh?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, okay, maybe not for me, but for my neighbor who,
You know,
Oh,
yeah. Well, why don't we go ahead and transfer that to all of the traffic laws, right?
Yeah. Anyway, I have to go.
Yeah. Well, I will continue reading the super chats, and we will talk to Karen next week, hopefully. Well, next week.
Have a good night.
Yeah, I think
Good
next
night.
week you have your thing too.
No.
Oh, that's 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, a week and a half.
Week and a half. Okay. Well, then next week we can shill it again.
All right.
There we go.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Good night to
Good
my
night.
fellow wrongthink boogeyman Karen. Now there are only 2 wrongthink boogeymen left besides myself in the chat. But I am going to leave Karen's icon up to confuse the feminists that are watching the stream. And we will go on to Hoki Bukisa. Gave us $4.99. Oh, before I do that, well, and he said, but he's wearing a MAGA hat. Whee! I wanted to point out, because we had that mention of the hair evidence. In 1996, there was a case study done by or on behalf of the FBI of cases where there had been conviction on the word of forensic experts that did things like hair comparison and other similar types of comparison, and the DNA evidence acquitted a quarter of the convicts whose convictions had been won on the basis of these experts' testimony. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the crime didn't happen. It may be there are some cases of rape accusation where, you know, the girl says, well, I was passed out at a party and somebody had sex with me, and I'm pretty sure it was that guy. And it turns out maybe somebody did have sex with her passed out body. So somebody is guilty of rape, but it wasn't that guy. It was somebody else. But there's also going to be, among these cases, there will be people who lied. That, you know, they had sex with somebody and then they didn't want to admit who they had sex with, so they accused some other guy of raping them. Or they got pregnant, so they accused some other guy of raping them. And according to this, these guys had successfully challenged their convictions using these DNA tests on existing evidence, had served on average 7 years in prison. So some of them served less, but some of them served more. And the average was 7 years. Talk about 7 years in hell.
Oh my God.
No kidding.
And that's so I wanted to point that out simply because, you know, we had brought up the thing about expert testimony and hair and everything. Hair was one of the types of forensic evidence that experts had been so sure about, and there had been convictions that were overturned, that the convictions were because of testimony regarding hair. Tyler Preston gave us $5 and said, are you sure that all of this isn't one big episode of South Park? Because the reactions can be real.
You never know sometimes, honestly.
And back when I was talking about my shoulders, Xeranx gave us $2 and said, I'm now imagining security specialist Hannah. So back in the 90s, I did have a job for a while. One of my jobs was as a security guard. So it's not the same quite exactly, but I did do security work.
Well, you would make a pretty imposing security guard, that's true.
Well, and I was on the security team at the first ICMI. So
nice.
And it was fun. But so there's that. I don't know if I'd call myself a specialist, but I've worked in security. Mr. Roboto
Awesome.
gave us $2 and said, it's the perception of women being shorter and smaller. And there's that. Although not all of us are shorter or smaller.
Yeah, as basically just discussed.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Let's see. French Honey Badger gave us $5 and said, Lucien Valzan also says to use all the reporting services created by the enemy to apply their standards to them and also kill the service. And that's true. That is a point. And he's got a point there. And it is, like I said, when we brought up the bit about Occidental College, that's not the only time that I've pointed that out. This is something that, with respect to these laws, one way to really bring it home how bad they are is to start applying them to women. You know, the fact that women were getting caught up in the kangaroo court system in universities was one of the things that has helped to make it understood how bad the Title IX standards were.
Well, it's like we were talking about earlier. The best thing to do is to punish these people by the rules that they requested to be put in place.
And if you want it to be understood that something is bad, show how it impacts women. Unfortunately, that is the way our society works. It shouldn't be. If you show how it impacts people, that should be enough. But if you show how it impacts women, you get the victim factor. You don't necessarily get the victim factor showing how it impacts men. And then the other end of it is you get it impacting victim cultists. They're going to complain. This should not be happening to us. And they're not going to be able to find an effective way to make that the rules on Twitter apply only one direction without having it be so blatant and obvious that it will cause problems for Twitter. Master Rogue gave us $5 and says, Prim! Huggy face, heart, smiley face. If taxation is theft, then I guess that's why he's called Caesar. Because he seizes it.
Yeah. Very nice.
The DC V Titan gave us $2 Canadian and said, somebody say eggplants. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 eggplants. So we have been thoroughly eggplanted. I feel unsafe. I'm triggered.
maybe overestimating the number of eggplants there.
Well, yeah, there's like there's 10 eggplants in the comment. It's actually a lot of ratatouille ingredients there. We just need to get some peppers and some zucchini and some spices, some tomatoes, some onion, garlic. I would be a happy camper. Linux Freebird gave us $10 and said, as the viewer, what can we do to support men's rights and stop this extreme authoritarian control on our governments? I feel like this MAGA kid is doing something that we needed done a long time ago. So among other things, when there are men's rights gatherings, go. Network with other men's rights activists. Learn what people are doing in their communities. Learn what people are doing in your community and join in those efforts. Write to your congressman. Write to your members of parliament. Contact media. Converse with the general public. Get into Twitter fights. You know, maybe not necessarily smackdown, drag out, get yourself suspended, you know, once every couple of months type fights, but talk to people. Point out the ridiculousness. And when somebody like Betsy DeVos comes along and says, I am going to make these changes, and feminists get all up in arms, write to her and support what she's doing so that she knows that it's not just feminists who are watching what she's doing. You know, when it comes to candidates, you look at this last election. I looked at who was the party that was completely and utterly consumed by, if we just make a bunch of false accusations, we'll win. And I voted against him. And the one situation where I compromised that was with a candidate who had supported the Campus Save Act, which I like to call the Campus False Accuser Support Act. And he faced an accusation that was at the very least questionable, and pretty much looked to me like a false accusation, because it was a domestic violence accusation, and the ex-wife was like, well, no, I had actually lied because I was angry. So, I mean, it's pretty cut and dried case there. That was a false accusation. You'd have to show me some significant evidence to prove otherwise after she came out and said, oh, I lied, you know. But in any case, I mean, it's possible because she was supporting his candidacy, but I really doubt that she would come out and admit that she lied if she hadn't. But that was the only one. And I really couldn't vote for somebody that openly supported false accuser support legislation either. But if he hadn't done that, he would have been the only Democrat that I voted for, and it would have been because he was falsely accused. And that was my way of sending a message. You know, I will support the candidate that you lie about, because if you're going to use lies to try to torpedo candidates, then, you know, I want it to be as ineffective as humanly possible. So just stuff like that. Make your demonstrations, and when there are ways to make it known how many people object to a condition or support a change, be part of that. If it's a march, then march. If it's a letter writing campaign, write letters. If it's communicating to your local media, communicate.
And networking with other groups that are trying to help make a change. Like, that was basically how I got involved with Cafe, right? So yeah, just reaching out to people that are trying to make those changes if you're having trouble thinking of ways to do it yourself.
Yep, exactly. You know, when you get a chance, sometimes it's just little things too. Like, you get a chance to do something for somebody that's in a rough situation. You find out that your friend is being harassed by a repeat false accuser. Spend extra time with your friend so that your friend has a witness. You know, that you can go into court and say, well, he was at my house. You know, if you're able, because he was at your house. That kind of thing. That's also a very important thing. Yeah, and ask other people what they're doing, and see if people know things that they're doing that's working that you can do as well. Going on, Exploding Prinny gave us $5 and said, how did Twitter become the ruler of the zeitgeist? Why do random commenters get so much power? Any advice on nuking Twitter? And this is a tough one. All right. We're not going to get rid of Twitter, and we shouldn't. Twitter's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a thing. It's like a hammer, or a newspaper, or a telephone. And what really is the problem with Twitter right now? And it's the problem with the financial institutions. It's the problem with Patreon and PayPal and MasterCard. And that is, in the United States, our federal government has decided to find workarounds to avoid respecting our civil rights under our Constitution, including the right to free speech. What they did was they came out with a policy, Operation Choke Point. Initially, it was intended, or at least allegedly intended, just to stop terrorists from getting money through legal means, legal business transactions that that take place in the United States that transfer money out of the country to terrorist organizations overseas. But they worded it so broadly and so inclusively of things besides terrorism, basically, that it became an instrument of allowing companies like MasterCard to turn around and say, well, we can deny financial services to companies that uphold civil rights that we disapprove. So they can tell Walmart, you can't sell these types of firearms. You have to have rules about who can and can't buy firearms at your store. And they can tell PayPal and Patreon who they can do business with. So if they don't like your politics, you can't basically be a creator that takes donations or patronage through one of these aggregates. That has to change. But it's not going to change by attacking Twitter or Patreon or Patron or PayPal, I mean, or even MasterCard. It's going to change by getting that policy removed. And it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to have to involve convincing politicians. And convincing politicians to give up power that they have grabbed is hard as hell. The other end of it is there's one other thing that these social media sites have that they're abusing, and that is a law that protects them from lawsuits due to liability for things that have been posted on their sites. They're not considered publishers of those things because they don't acknowledge having editorial capability to prevent publication of those things. Well, if they don't have that capability, then how are they able to do so much political censorship? So if they need to have to make a choice. Either they acknowledge they have that capability and they take responsibility for exercising it, or they acknowledge that that capability is extremely limited and that they end up abusing it when they politically censor, and they stop politically censoring and they maintain that protection. But I don't think they should be able to maintain that protection and still politically censor people. And I hear somebody in the background waiting to speak up, so...
Yeah, I think Lauren was going to say something there.
No, actually, I did want to say something. What I was going to say is that Twitter eventually is going to die. It's going to go the way of MySpace and Facebook. You know, I don't think there's any saving it from where it's gone. It's just Twitter is over. It's sad because it is a tool, and it's a really good tool. It's a really useful tool, but all the tools have turned it into shit. So,
well, there's always the latest, greatest, next best thing, and there seems to be that tendency of something new comes along that isn't the same as the existing formats and forums, and everybody runs to that because it allows them to do things that they couldn't do with the other ones. But I don't know. I don't know that they're going to necessarily come up with something. Probably the closest thing would be Minds, because Minds allows you to use cryptocurrency on the site, and you can actually profit from your views slightly using cryptocurrency, and then Gab has capabilities that Twitter doesn't as well. Gab actually has an edit button. So, you know, the edit button that they've been begging for on Twitter for like 10 years. And it's not quite that long, but... And Twitter has never given. Gab has it. So, there's that. But yeah, people do run away from each thing to go to the latest, greatest, next best thing. I used to be a very, very frequent Redditor, and now I'm not. once upon a time, years and years ago, actually had a live journal. We won't talk about that.
I did too.
Yeah, I know. Everybody had a live journal, right? And somewhere out there, I think I still have a MySpace page. So there you go.
Nice.
But yeah, there's that. But I don't think that taking down Twitter should be a goal. Improving it, maybe. Rolling back some of the shit, definitely. But I wouldn't want to get rid of it. It's useful. And it has a right to exist. Albert Nada gave us $5 Canadian and said, after they busted her for lying, he should have kicked the shit out of her. I understand the sentiment, but he really didn't have to. She's done a pretty damn good job of that herself. In fact, better than he ever could. She's pretty much wrecked everything good in her life. And she blames him. It's just for the record. And that's back to the 7 years in hell story. For those that are familiar with that story, is a 7-year ordeal of malicious prosecution at the hands of a false accuser who was a vexatious litigant. And she is actually on Ohio's short list of vexatious litigants. So, you can figure out which one she is. More power to you. Zorant00 gave us $5 and said, I think the dog was triggered that you dared ask for proof. Good vibes sent out to all with consent, of course.
Of course.
And French Honey Badger gave us $5 and said, Karen, you make me love cats even more. French Honey Badger loves pussy, confirmed. Xeranx gave us $5 and said, wasn't there a longitudinal study saying 70% of allegations are false? Not exactly. I think the McDowell study had 65% of the allegations in that study. But it's not necessarily that high of a number. Isn't necessarily applicable to the rest of society, but it does call into question the rest of society.
And there were different categories, weren't there? Like like maliciously false, not able to be proven or withdrawn, and things like that. I might be thinking of something else, but I know that there were a lot of clarifications to the false allegations.
Yeah, there was that study, and there was the Canaan study. If I remember right, the Canaan study is the one that came up with 45%. And there was a study, the Hindi did a study in Delhi, and that one came up with a 65 to 85% false rate. Now, that's in India. India has a factor the United States doesn't. Breach of promise to marry gets treated by a lot of young women as, so the guy says he's going to marry her, she has sex with him, he doesn't marry her, she feels raped. She files a report, she finds out under the law that's not rape. The other thing that happens is you get two young kids that decide they want to get married, they run off together and elope, the parents are like, no, you cannot marry my daughter, they accuse the guy of rape. And the parents find out that under the law that's not rape either. So you have those ending up as part of the false accusation rate in India. But you also have women who refuse to cooperate with the police after they start asking questions to gather evidence to prove the rape, and they start discovering that it's more likely they're going to prove it didn't happen. So you have a wide variety of things there as well. And then there are studies that have smaller numbers, smaller percentages. So the rate, the range is, the low end of the range is 8%, and the high end of the range is about 65% in Western countries. And we're not sure what the actual average is. But there are different studies using different methodology have come up with different amounts. The low end, basically they go so far as to practically forbid effort at actually vetting the accusation for potential falsehood, and that they still end up with 8%. So there is a significant number that turns out to be false. Mr. Roboto gave us $2. Does that aspirin between the legs work? Asking, no. No, it does not. Anth Bobo gives us $2 Canadian and says, I want nothing to do with women anymore. I guess that makes you a MGTOW. And I ran into that a lot. It's a tough thing to discuss, because on one hand, you know, I don't want to scare guys away from women. And on the other hand, I can't rationally advise guys to look at the details that we're giving and the information that we're giving and then just ignore them.
Yeah.
You really have to vet people for character. You can't just trust people because they're women.
Yeah, it's about being informed of everything that's going on, right? And I mean, being informed of everything that's going on allows people to make more informed decisions about who they want to associate with and what risks they're willing to, you know, kind of take into account.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not going to turn around and say, well, you should get married anyway. I'm not going to turn around and say, well, you should date anyway. I'm not necessarily going to say everybody has to be a MGTOW either. It's a decision every guy has to make for himself. But it's perfectly reasonable to be openly aware of the fact that our legal system basically does not allow men the opportunity to protect themselves when a woman is dishonest, or abusive, or willing to commit perjury, willing to file false complaints and things like that. Our legal system really makes men vulnerable to that. And so if a woman is not of stellar character, you know, you're taking a big risk. That's, you know, I can't really rationally say otherwise. And there's a lot of unfair things, you know, that go along with that. So then we have Q Brother Soulstar as our last super chat, and he says, my Tumblr lasts on lost.tumblr.com lives on. Men's rights. Look me up. And that's that's an interesting one. I will have to look at that. I haven't done a lot with Tumblr. Tumblr's one of the sites that I just kind of like. I took a slight interest in it and then never spent any time there. So there's been a few Tumblr blogs, few men's rights Tumblr blogs that I really liked. A couple of them are gone. So it's good to see new ones cropping up. But with that, I think our sausage is 2.5 hours long, and I'm pretty sure that it's a big enough sausage that all of the women in the vicinity probably feel unsafe. Our sausage is bigger than eggplant. Yeah. And so I and my fellow wrongthink boogeymen, we're gonna jet on out of here on this giant sausage. So thanks to my co-hosts for sticking it out. Thanks to all of our listeners. Thanks for all of the wonderful super chats. And thanks to everyone who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
Good night.